Now let's take a look at common mistakes and how to avoid them when it comes to MDM. First, you need to know what compliances you have to abide by and what they say. So I have a few of them listed here. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but what you may notice is that if you handle credit cards, medical information, or financial information, then not only are you required to have some sort of antivirus, anti-malware encryption, but potentially you're also required to have two-factor authentication in place. And so this is something that lots of companies don't realize or know, that the compliances actually say that these things are required. And they've never gone about implementing these things in their organization, even though they handle that sort of data. So next question, does your company have sensitive data or protected data? Even though you might not be in a compliance area like credit cards or health information, lots of companies have sensitive information. Sales lists of companies that they've sold their product to, or contacts that they might be working with, and so forth, or intellectual property of applications they may be developing. So maybe not everyone has the protected data, but they definitely have sensitive data. And it looks like the polls have confirmed that 63% of companies have sensitive data, whereas only 22% have some sort of protected data. And so we'll see more about that in a second. And so another big common mistake that we see is that you need to make sure that when you are selecting technologies, you need to do it with users' input, not without. And we see this a lot in the encryption market due to encryption really being a technology that users are not very familiar with because they don't use encryption in their personal life. Whereas if you look at the market, like the two-factor authentication market, most consumers have used this in some form or fashion in their personal life. But specifically in the encryption market, we've noticed that only 32% of business managers agree that encryption was easy to use. So this is actually the users of the encryption software. And so we believe that not only does the solution need to be easy for IT to use, but the actual users need to think it's as easy as well. Because if it's not easy, productivity will suffer, users will complain, then they'll push for change. Or if it's too difficult for IT managers, then they'll never ever deploy and implement the solution properly or at all. Another common mistake is not finding out the balance that fits your company the best when it comes to productivity, security, and privacy concerns. With a mobile workforce, a lot of companies like to jump on the bandwagon of monitoring their employees via tracking software to make sure they're doing their job. Other companies make sure they're hiring self-starting employees that they can trust to work remotely. Either way, at the end of the day, having managers in place that can properly evaluate performance with or without monitoring solutions can go a long way to ease this concern. And when it comes to third-party devices, in order to prevent data leaks and breaches, companies will lock down things like USB drives. But what happens when employees have to copy a PowerPoint to another device to deliver a presentation? What if they want to work on some other device other than their work computer? Typically, this begins, employees try to figure out ways around it. They email documents to themselves. They upload files to a third-party cloud service like Google Drive or Dropbox. And ultimately, this may make your security posture even weaker because now you don't have visibility into what's actually going on. So when it comes to these third-party devices, this is one of the policies that needs to be thought out prior to implementation. And then finally, restrictive access ties very much into the previous concern, and that lots of IT departments lock down devices so that users can do limited functions. But how much time is wasted when the employee, in order to access or use a new application, needs to stop what they're doing so they can enter in an IT ticket, then wait for it to be carried out? Maybe just monitoring what applications are installed on an employee's computers might be enough rather than restricting all freedom. Or if you're going to restrict access to devices, I typically recommend polling the office first to find out all the applications users may use, even once, so you can make sure it's allowed to be installed in your environment, so you don't have to worry about it down the road. Finally, no user education and notification. All of these policies and procedures do nothing if employees have not read, and more importantly, understood the policies set out in front of them. I commonly see a disconnect from the IT policies and how they're written and what the employee actually understands the policies to mean. Also, employees are more likely to abide by IT policies if they understand why these policies were implemented and why they're in place. So that's why something like cybersecurity training in some form or fashion that can teach employees about the risks and begin explaining why some of these policies and procedures were implemented can go a very long way. In fact, ESET offers free cybersecurity training for any business to deploy to their user base. And you can find a link to sign up for this in the resource list to the top right. Now we'll go ahead and we'll move on to best practices and solutions for MDM. First, endpoint security. With users roaming from public place to public place and putting their devices at risk, an endpoint solutions system that can fit into this work style is very important. In an endpoint security solution, we recommend a few things. First, a single console that is cross-platform, that even has the ability to manage smartphones. Because this ability is paramount so that management of these additional devices in a workplace is not an extra burden on the IT staff. Next, due to typical employee shortages in IT departments, it is best to start with a solution that comes in a set it and forget it fashion. Then tweak it to better fit your company, if any tweaks are actually even needed at all. And you do not want to get tied down to constantly tweaking and configuring a solution, but want to move on to different projects across your IT department. This endpoint security solution should block a wide range of threats in a single package. You should not have to install something to block malware, something to block ransomware, and something to block potentially unwanted applications like toolbars. And then finally, and one of the most important for mobile workforces, is the ability to work both on-premise and off-premise. Now, on to encryption. With an encryption solution, like I mentioned earlier, you need it to be simple for IT to set up, and you need it to be simple for end users. Of course, the end user side is more important because this is usually a technology that they have never seen or had any exposure to. And the encryption solution should include all forms of encryption that you will use. And I stress that fact because sometimes IT departments get caught up in just doing direct feature comparisons between one solution and others, rather than focusing on what features the IT department will actually use and what solutions carry out those features in the best way. Then, as we all know, employees will lose their passwords at the most inopportune times, so you need a way to unlock users' devices even when they don't have network access and are off-site. And then finally, it needs to be able to do this both on-premise and off-premise. Then, two-factor authentication. 2FA needs to be quick and easy to set up, once again, not just for IT departments, but companies who may not have an IT department at all. This is especially a big thing in law offices and accounting offices. They're going ahead and they're implementing 2FA to better ensure safety of sensitive data. So you need to make sure that the 2FA system is easy enough for non-technical people to set up and configure for their office. The second component is ease of use for end users, and this is getting easier and easier to do because most end users utilize a 2FA solution in their personal life. And the two-factor solution needs to support the applications that you utilize, like VPNs or remote desktop and so forth. And then finally, you need a way to unlock accounts for users who may lose their second factor. Whether it's a hard token or a soft token like a cell phone, you need a way to be able to regain their access when they might be remote.